Rome began as a small settlement along the Tiber River in Italy. Over time, it expanded to include the entire Mediterranean region, becoming the most successful empire the world had ever seen. When the Etruscan monarchy was overthrown in 509 BC, the new Roman leaders set up a form of government called a republic, or thing of the people. The most powerful governing body was the Senate, which decreed the laws. It consisted of 300 members from prominent families. The Romans created a large Senate because they wanted to prevent any single person from becoming too powerful. As Rome expanded its power, riches flooded into the country from trade and from conquered lands. Some Romans gained tremendous wealth, and a great gap grew between the rich and the poor. Corruption and greed became rampant and replaced the virtues of hard work and devotion to duty that had formed the basis of the Republic. By the 1st century BC, the Roman Republic was in serious trouble. Unemployment was widespread. Small farmers could not compete with wealthy estates, called latifundias, where slave labor was used to produce crops cheaply. And Rome's volunteer army of citizen soldiers had been replaced by professionals who were more loyal to the commanders who hired them than to the Republic. Amid this chaos, rival Roman generals from across the empire marched their armies into Rome, some to defend the government, others to overthrow it. Civil war broke out. In the meantime, an ambitious Roman commander was covering himself in glory. His name was Julius Caesar. Caesar had set out with his army in 59 BC. After 9 years of impressive victories, they had conquered Gaul, the area that is now France. News of Caesar's great achievement spread quickly. In Rome, the Senate feared Caesar's popularity. They ordered him to disband his army and return to Rome, but Caesar refused. Instead, he secretly led his army across the Rubicon River into northern Italy and marched on Rome. His arrival set off another civil war. When the fighting was over, Caesar had won. To celebrate, he hosted a banquet for 22,000 of Rome's poorest citizens. The people celebrated Caesar's victory, and the Senate was forced to vote him the powers of a dictator. Caesar was not Rome's first dictator. In the past, the Senate had sometimes appointed a dictator during times of war. These dictators had given up their power voluntarily after 6 months, but Caesar had different plans. Caesar used his new power to address many of Rome's problems. Between 48 and 44 BC, he began a number of important reforms that helped the poor and drew up plans to reorganize and strengthen the empire. His reforms included giving free grain to the hungry, work to the jobless, and land to poor farmers. He planned a road system across Italy, made changes to how provinces were governed, and extended Roman citizenship to many conquered people. Caesar became even more popular with the common people and more hated by many senators. They feared that Caesar would try to make himself king. In 44 BC, these senators' fears were realized when Caesar asked the people to elect him dictator for life. If they were to save the Republic, many senators believed they would have to eliminate Caesar. On March 15th, when Caesar arrived at the Senate, his enemies ambushed him and stabbed him to death, a total of 35 blows. The common people were outraged. After Caesar's death, Rome plunged once more into civil war. Caesar's reign had changed Rome and the views of its people. Now they would rather have the real gifts of a dictator than the promises of a republic. The fighting raged for 13 years. At last, in 31 BC, Octavian Caesar, Julius's grandnephew, emerged victorious. The Senate acted quickly to recognize Octavian as head of state. They granted him absolute power for life. He took the title Augustus, or Exalted One. Although it was not officially proclaimed, the Republic had ended. In its place was the new Roman Empire. Caesar Augustus was its first emperor. Augustus used his new powers cautiously, retaining many of the forms of the old republic, while concentrating power in his own hands. At the same time, he turned over many of the day-to-day tasks of running the government to a competent civil service. In this way, he left himself free to devote his energies to improving and strengthening the empire. Generally, Augustus and his successors used their unlimited power to give the Romans what they wanted. They erected aqueducts to provide a steady supply of fresh water, built new roads to improve trade, and granted more rights to the people living in the provinces outside Italy. And the emperors gave the masses bread and circuses, free food, and lavish entertainments to suppress any discontent. But some emperors abused their power. Rome's third emperor, Caligula, demanded that people address him as a god. He routinely tortured and executed his enemies. After his death, a rumor spread that he had given his horse a manger of ivory and appointed it to a high government post. The excesses of Nero, Rome's fifth emperor, may have surpassed even Caligula. The Roman people blamed Nero for setting a fire that destroyed much of Rome, just so that he could have a hand in rebuilding the city. He further used the fire as an excuse to persecute Rome's Christians, accusing them of starting the blaze. Despite these abuses, the Roman Empire prospered for 200 years. Beginning with the reign of the first Emperor Augustus, Romans enjoyed the Pax Romana, or Roman peace. During this time, Rome's power reached its height, and Romans enjoyed a period of peace and prosperity longer than any Europeans had ever known.